Hello, and welcome to our show, Midwest Weekly Power Rankings and Stats, starring myself, Herwick, and my co host, CLT. Today we're going to give you our take on the top 13 teams going into playoffs, and you're probably wondering, why is there 13, Jake? There's only 12. All right, well, I'm going to break that down in a second. But before I do that, I wanted to ask my co-host CLT how he's doing today.
I'm doing all right, man. We're hanging in there. Cold week over here. I had to work outside in it, but we're hanging in there, man.
Very good, very good. Well, without further ado, we will get into the power rankings, and I'll break down exactly why there's 13 teams. So I'm going to go in more in depth on Midwest Weekly itself, but just the shortest version of it is Sad Jellyfish unfortunately had to forfeit their match due to some complications within scheduling for the match. And so instead of having a forfeit, we have decided to bring in a replacement team with the blessing of both captains, captain of Ghost as well as the captain of Sad Jellyfish. So we do have a team that came in, and they were chosen based on whoever had the best uh, record, right? Or best match record too. So in this case, we had two 5 seed teams that were eligible and a 2-3 series record. When I did and tallied up their match records, one of them had a slightly better match record, and that's the team we went with. Just because otherwise it'd be super complicated, and it was like a last second thing. It's really unfortunate. So if anyone's wondering, that is why. And again, I can go a little more in depth on Midwest Weekly, but I'm not going to drag this on anymore. So let's get into Herwick's Baba Yaga power rankings. Let's go. Starting with our first team at 13 CLT. It's Peanut Butter and Jelly. So, yes, it is Peanut Butter and Jelly who is officially in playoffs and will be playing Ghosts in the first round. Um, the reason why they're 13, well, it's just a simple fact that they didn't make playoffs initially. So, I'm going to have them lower, and I'm going to be paying respects to Sad Jellyfish in these power rankings regardless. Any disagreement there, CLT, on leaving them at 13?
No, I think they were definitely the first team out looking in and had a lot of really competitive series. But I agree with the logic.
Yeah, yeah. They definitely were, and due to their loss, they had dropped 5 spots. I actually did a power ranking with all 18 teams just for fun, but I didn't want to go into all 18, seeing that this was going to be really just based around the 12 teams in playoffs. Now, of course, the 13th team. Um, but yeah, so that's where Peanut Butter Jelly is going to be. But now let's get into kind of like the real breakdown into these power rankings. So who's going to be sitting here at our number 12? That's going to be Insane Banana Posse. I was super impressed with their victory. I mean, number one, good games. Number two, they clutched it up when it mattered most because they obviously needed that win in week 5 over Castakers. Um, and yeah, they played their hearts out. So they actually ended up moving up 2 spots from the previous week going into playoffs here. And you kind of take on Insane Banana Posse as the 12th team.
I'm
CLT.
sorry.
I was saying any take on Insane Banana Posse being at the 12 CLT.
Yes, sorry about that. No, I think they were impressive. I know some people kind of think them as more of the Um, like they like to cook, they like to play the game their own way. But when we played them in week 5, like we got rid of some of the strats that they like to pull out, and we asked them to play standard against us, and they played really well. I think War having his own unique champion pool in mid can be something unique going into playoffs, and their bot lane plays really consistent. And Flame Dog as a jungler, he has his own like brand of jungling, which I think can get very excited, especially in like a 3 or 5 game series, depending how deep of a run they make.
Yeah, no, for sure. I agree with that take. Well, we can get into the next teams. I want you. I'm trying to remember exactly. I can't remember Omar is here for a second. Reveal the next. Let's go four. Next 4 teams.
All right.
All right. So we got our next four teams here. I asked them to do that for a couple of reasons. This is basically your list of 3 and 2 teams. There are a couple more above them, but I want to start with these four specifically. And see what you kind of think about these four being where they're at. So you've got Cal Poly here sitting at the number 11 spot. Sad Jellyfish coming in at the number 10. Load the Cannons at 9, and Ghost at 8. So I wanted to see kind of your take. Do you agree with these four teams and where they're placed? And then I can kind of break down my opinion on it as well, on why I did what I did.
Um, yeah, for the most part, I mean, I agree with them. I think you could kind of rearrange these four teams in any little way. I think Load the Cannons had the best showing in week 5, so they definitely got rewarded with a playoff spot. It was kind of a play and you're in, and had a competitive match. Cal Poly's been super consistent, hasn't had any big wins, but no real big losses either. Like they're just a really solid competitive team. Ghost is probably the one I could argue maybe a touch down just because of how they looked and the magnitude of the loss that they had, but they also were playing a top tier team. So you could argue any of these anywhere. Sad Jellyfish I think is kind of the odd man out. Unfortunately, they got a win based off of forfeit, so we didn't get the sample size or their what they were going to look like going into playoffs this week.
Yeah, and what they could have been if they got to play, right? I mean, as I
Yeah.
stated before. Yeah. So basically, my take, how I kind of went into this, I kind of looked at again who they beat week 5, and also what were what were the matchups prior to. I do agree with you. Cal Poly doesn't really have any bad losses, but I don't think they have a signature win. I guess their
Hmm.
best win would be Instinct CK, but because it came week 1 of the season, I kind of feel like it's not as impressive anymore. Like if they would have beaten TK Benchers along the way or something, that could be a whole different conversation. Uh, but yeah, beating the Sunset Defenders last week, they dominated them, but I mean, they pretty much lost to everybody. So in that group, I mean, it's hard to go like, oh yeah, man, this is their signature win. So you could again go based off that week 1. On the flip side, Jellyfish, they almost didn't even make any movement, and almost even dropped. To be honest, I think they only slightly moved because of the fact that I did think that they're a better team than Cal Poly, and we're in a stronger group, and their matches were very competitive all the way across the board, except for the series against Backdoor. I think that was their worst series overall.
Hmm.
Um, and then yeah, Loaded Cannons and Ghost. I think Ghost slightly of the better team right now, just slightly. What we've seen from Ghost, we've seen some really, really high highs, but we've also seen some interesting lows, especially that last week. And I think that loss there to Instinct CK was brutal. I mean, Instinct CK took them to the bank, right? We discussed it on the recap of week 5, and so that's why I kind of got them lower here, dropping 2 spots from where they were. As far as the Cannons, they took one of the biggest jumps we had up from the week. So that mean, obviously going into this, I consider that, and yeah, they look really good. They look solid. It was a really good win over Peanut Butter and Jelly. They technically knocked them out of the playoffs in that win, but yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what the Cannons can do, and we'll discuss that more when we get to the Midwest Weekly. But
Yep.
yeah, we can go on. If you want to reveal, let's go. Give me the next. Give me the next 4 teams. Let's do the next 4.
Next four teams coming right up.
All right. So yeah, this is right before the top 3 here. Um, yeah, man. Before I let you kind of give me your take, I'm gonna kind of break it down because it is pretty interesting. So technically speaking, you've got both Backdoor TK and Scorch also at 3 and 2, right? But even though I said all split, said Jellyfish historically beaten Scorch all season. The reason why that said Jellyfish isn't in that upper echelon, right, was because 1, they lost to Backdoor Bandits. 2, I think TK Gamers is at an elite level right now. But 3, I thought Scorch's win over TK Gamers was super impressive, and the fact that Sad Jellyfish, remember, they didn't play their opponent, so it was forfeit unfortunately. So kind of was like, kind of good and bad for them. So that's kind of why this four kind of shaped up a little higher than everybody. Um, what's kind of your take on these four here? And to clarify, it's Backdoor Bandits at the 7, TK Gamers at the 6, Scorch sitting here at the 5, and Small Brain No Mechanics at the 4.
No, I think for the most part it's pretty accurate. Uh, Scorch had a very impressive win, especially in that game two where you felt like they could have gotten hands checked by the better team in TK Gamers, and they stood their ground and played really well. I think they have a really good understanding of what they want to play and how they're going to play it with their sub mid laner that's been with them, though I think they had a different sub in week 5. But overall, like they're playing really well. I think they're peaking at the top at the best part. Backdoor Bandits had a very, I wouldn't say like it wasn't a low kind of loss, but they definitely did not, I think, play the greatest week 5 against Small Brains. The loss didn't look great for them, but they definitely showed that they're still like a strong team. So I think it was just a combination of backdoor playing not up to par, but also Small Brains I think played really well overall. And then TK Gamers, I mean that team unfortunately had a loss against Scorch and against Coin Flip, which kind of got them out of the running for the second seed and potentially that bye. But overall, they looked really good. I don't think I don't think they ended the regular season as great as they wanted to. So I'd be curious to see with this week off if they play really well. Small Brains being at at 4-1, I think is kind of interesting. Um, we can touch on that when you reveal the next teams, but I think that's probably the one thing you might have to clarify there. I
Okay.
think that's a really hard take.
Yeah, yeah. You think it bad, like as in it's too high or too low?
I think it's too low personally. I mean, when you win the group and you have the 3-1 teams play each other in Group B for the first place in the bye, and you show up that week like you did. I think having a 2 seed ahead of Small Brains, whichever one ends up being, uh, is interesting to say the
Hmm.
least.
Yeah.
Because I think I could argue that Small Brains won, in my opinion, the most competitive group. So them at 4 is interesting.
Yeah.
But we can touch on that when you reveal.
I think, and this will be the biggest thing for me. My biggest take right now is that loss to Low the Cannons, the 2-0. It wasn't a 2-1. It was a 2-0 loss, right? They got swept
Mhm.
in that series. I think that's the biggest reason why it's kind of weighing them off a little bit, and the fact that they didn't get to showcase themselves against Ice Wall. They also got the forfeit victory. Um, I think that they probably do beat Ice Wall. Like I don't think they're going to go in that series and lose, but I do think that is part of that echelon for me is why I'm not putting him higher than the 4th spot. They did move up 3 spots though. But I do agree with your other takes. I assume you kind of are happy where Scorch, TK, and Backdoor kind of land. Is what you're kind of leading towards.
Yeah, yeah. Like
Yeah.
Scorch was a relative. I don't want to say like an unknown, but we hadn't seen them reach their peak. But it felt like these last 2 weeks, even though they had two different mid lane subs, they felt like they figured out how they want to play the game, and they're integrating their subs, I think, a little bit better overall. So Scorch had a like probably the most Scorch and Load the Cannons had the two most impressive wins of week 5 that I think catapulted them.
Yeah. I actually think 7 spots up is the biggest jump we've seen. I could be wrong.
Yeah, yeah. I think we had a 5 jump earlier, but 7 is by far the biggest one. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, Scorch really impressed me with their win. So
Yeah.
um, but yeah, if you want, we'll just go ahead and reveal the next 3 teams. Then we'll just get it out of the way. I know we're revealing them quick this time, guys, but I feel like it's best here. So yeah, there it
Mhm.
is. There it is. So yeah, I end up with coin flip at the 1 again. They've pretty much been there for the last, I want to say, 3 weeks, maybe, or at least 2 weeks for sure, but maybe 3 weeks. And Think CK move themselves into the 2 spot, and then TK Penchers do fall 1, but they are at the 3 spot. So, yeah, go ahead and you can give me your. I'd love to hear your reasoning why maybe small brain should be over TK Benchers because that's what I assume you'd be leaning towards.
I would lead to small brains being over TK in this case. TK unfortunately didn't showcase anything in week 5. They had to forfeit in the T1 Tempest against some scheduling issues, which I think is, something to note that's been just difficult for a lot of teams, the split and scheduling. But I could argue that the number 1 seed, the 4-1, which has an 0-2 loss to another playoff team in as I noted before, in the most competitive group, I feel like they need to be rewarded and at least be top 3. Yeah, they have a very disappointing black mark in the loss of load to cannons, but unless you're coin flip, you have a black spot on your record somewhere.
Hmm.
So I think the win against Backdoor was good enough, and I think TK not showcasing anything week 5, I would interchange those two, but that's not I think the top 4 to 5 teams, maybe even 6 teams down to the TK gamers, if they all play their game and they're very cohesive, they could all make deep runs into the playoffs.
Yeah. So I wanna state again. I think the biggest thing is like if you're looking at benchers, I think their victories are really good. They beat teams um, like Ghost, like Cal Poly. Um, they did lose to Instinct CK, uh, obviously, but that was their only really true loss, right? The other one was a forfeit, and let's be honest, that doesn't really count. So um, they beat the good teams in their group, and I think that top part of that group was very strong. Those 4 teams that all made playoffs are very good teams in my opinion. Um, very solid group. I think if you interchange any of those teams into any other group, it is possible that either the group just gets even stronger, or depending on what you're swapping them for, they could be the team making the playoffs over other teams in those groups. So
Hmm.
um, that's kind of where I'm at with TK Benchers over Small Brains. I think they just have the slight edge. Plus, uh, again, that that O2 loss just it looks pretty rough against Load Cannons in my book.
Yeah,
They,
but Instinct, I mean, you could argue Instinct and coin flip. Instinct lost on a Mundo backdoor week 1, and they've been nothing but perfect since then. I realize we're splitting hairs here, and eventually all of these teams are going to fight it out in the playoffs. So it is what it is. But yeah, it's a healthy discussion for sure.
yeah, 100%. But yeah, I mean, we'll have to we could go back and forth all day on this, but I get what you're saying. So you definitely have Small Brains at least the 3 is what you're saying.
I would probably have small brains. Yeah, I think them at 3. Their loss between the 1 seeds is the worst loss between the group winners, the 1 seeds. But I think they overall have a much more impressive resume of wins over, I would argue, much qualitier teams. So,
Cool. So the rest of my list is pretty good then, you think?
I can't really argue it. I mean, all of these teams, all of the 1 seeds get to sit back and watch these 2, 3, 4 seeds kind of battle it out. So I think it's going to be quite interesting. You'll see a lot of questions answered between teams like Peanut Butter and Jelly and Ghost, as mentioned, and Cal Poly, and I just dawned on me, who do they play?
Cal Poly.
Um,
They play TK Gamers. Yeah.
they play TK. Okay, so yeah, you've got a good lot of high quality matchups here. So the
I should
bottom
also
the
point
bottom of
out,
this.
I didn't even note this, but I should point out TK Ventures also beat the 2 seeds of both Group A and Group B as well too. So I mean, like, they played
Yeah,
basically a whole other series in totality and won. So when you consider that too, I think you can give them the edge over Small Brain, right? Like I think you really can. Those were very good decisive victories as well over both Backdoor Bandits and Scorch. So
yeah, I could argue that. I think whoever comes out of these first round matchups are definitely going to earn it, and I think their fights against the number 1 seeds are going to be quite entertaining.
yeah, for sure. Well, with that being said, that's going to end that segment. We can go ahead and move into CLT's favorite segment, CLT's Island of Misfit Stats. All right, so CLT, you want to take us away with anything you've noted or seen this week?
Um, yeah, we can hop into some of this. Not going to be too long. Um, but looking at the top of the list, shocker again to nobody. Skarner almost eclipsed 50 bans, which is absolutely insane, but still has the highest power pick. And then you've got Victor alongside him, who hasn't been banned as much, but played a little bit more. I think the thing with Victor that I've noticed in some of these series is if your mid laner plays Victor, it's just getting auto banned out. And if your mid lane hasn't shown that they play Victor, teams are willing to leave it up and kind of see what you can do on the champion.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of similar to Hui. Like there's two styles of mid laners. There's either the guys that play Victors or the guy that plays Hui, and none of the teams want to see either champ. So they're just if you have one of those players on your team, you're getting banned out. I know I absorbed some Hui bans, but we've seen guys like Big B and Emperish, who are prominent Hui players, also absorb a lot of bans.
Yeah.
So and then like mid laners like Kepo from PB&J are very big Victor players, and PB&J also absorbs Victor bans because they can play it in the bot lane as well. So it just seems like those two champions stand out as like if your team plays it, it's getting banned against you. But the big riser I think we've seen them across the season has been Cassante. I know at the beginning of the season there were a couple Cassante players that were drawing bans, but it seems like the top laners have all started to realize that the champion's still really good, still does a boatload of damage. I mean, 11 and 3 is pretty insane for all things considering, and 78% win rate's absolutely crazy. Definitely one of the higher win rates in the league
Yep.
so far. But
I mean, with
uh,
14 picks, I mean, he's I need 14 picks or higher. He's got the highest winner right now, so pretty impressive.
yeah, um, but overall, you're still seeing a lot of Ashe getting played in the bot lane. Sivir has again continued the rise in popularity. You see some teams starting to pick her up and even blind pick her a little bit more. And she's showing that she has usefulness before her spike. There were champions like Jinx, who is currently 9 and 16. Actually, didn't see it was that bad. 36% win rates. Quite
Yeah,
quite rough.
she,
But you
she
see,
she's been suffering.
sorry.
I was gonna say.
Yeah. It's Jinx. It seems like you can attack Jinx comps a lot easier and a lot harder to where like Sivir, if you attack her, it's like, okay, I'm gonna pivot to Static Shiv and just wave clear until I get to, my spike. Plus, as Minus mentioned in a previous podcast, it's like if you hit the front line, you're still gonna do meaningful damage to the back line too. So, uh, yeah, it's been interesting. Nico is something we've kind of seen pop up every now and then. 7 and 3, 70% win rate. It seems like the Nico players are just slamming her, and teams can play with that champion a lot better than if you just try to like force her on there. But for the most part, like I said, for top lane, you've seen a lot of Cassante. You're seeing some Wukong getting flexed up there. Camille still holds a pretty prominent rating. And Ornn has kind of become the premier super tank up top if Cassante gets banned. For jungle, you're seeing still a boatload of Skarner, a boatload of Amumu. Wukong kind of goes both ways between jungle and top, but still pretty prominent pick.
Hey, something interesting about them. Both of Momo and Wukong are both 11 and 11.
Oh, look at that.
Make a wish.
And both 22 picked, actually.
Yeah, yeah, the same amount of picks. The only difference is the bans here. Wukong
Yeah.
taking less bans, and you gotta consider Amumu obviously been playing support a little bit, but
Yeah,
um,
I don't think there's been that much Amumu support, but I know like Fid's played it, and I think one other person has. maybe.
Yeah,
Um,
that's what's leading to the higher power per score between the two champions right now. It's just the fact that one has just more bans than the other,
yeah.
and it's 12 bans more. In fact, it's not even close. Momo's
Hmm.
got 12 bans more.
Yeah. But mid lane, I kind of already mentioned it. Victor, Wei, Ari still up there, though I think Ari's kind of dropped off. There's still a few Ari players in the league, so I just don't think it's the greatest answer. Syndra has made like a quiet appearance. Like there are definitely some Syndra players out there. Verika's one of them that it's their counter and to say something like Victor or Ari, where you're just hoping to bully them in the lane phase, try to spike early and as hard, and then be more of that burst mage. And then for the bot lane, again, Ashe, Sivir, Seraphine still hasn't really had a prominent pick in the bot lane. Jinx, we've seen Quirky and Varus kind of start to pop off a little bit. I know Corky is kind of flexed with mid as well, but Varus, as you're kind of highlighting there, 8-3, pretty insane. I like Varus as a as just kind of a blind pick in the sense if you're against these crit mages or sorry crit ADCs. He can go the lethality build. He can keep people at arm's reach and has really good like anti-dive by firing the ult on somebody. Can't really do great into like really hard engage, but if you're running at him with something like Skarner, Cassante a little bit, but like Skarner, Wukong, Poppy, Camille, he can ult them, keep them in place, and then the team blows them up. Plus, I think he has really good utility on his E. Grievous wounds early in the game can be pretty useful into some of these utility supports.
Yeah,
But yeah, speaking of supports here, Seraphine primarily being a support. Leona still having a really good presence. I think she's drawing quite a bit of bans from like certain Leona players. Of course, GeoProw's one of them. And also thank you GeoProw now for including Vi into the support pool. Thanks.
hey,
Um,
Leona, by the way, literally at the end of the split, like regular season's part, right? Finally, positive win rate.
oh,
Only took
yeah.
almost 20 games.
A little different than last split.
Yeah, much different
Um,
last split.
But yeah, seeing some Lulu, seeing some Caitlyn, like there's still a lot of diversity in the bot lane, which I appreciate. We've even seen different mages showing up in the bot lane. Got a shout out Boonstra's Acel. He just randomly took down there when it got counterpicked mid. But yeah, for the most part, I think everything's standard. I'm really kind of curious to see in this week off what certain teams pull out. Cal Poly's top laner, he brought out Aatrox and ended up picking a win on that, which he's 5-1. Probably something to keep in the back of your head. And looking at the patch notes, I don't see any top laners really getting a considerable amount of buffs. So, uh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's overall looking at the regular season, I don't remember the exact number, but I think we had what over 80% of the champions either picked or banned.
I can tell you the number right now. So it's 151 champions.
151 out
Oh,
of
I guess not picked. That's presence.
that's picked or banned.
Yeah, so that's picked or banned. As far as picked, now I'm actually curious. Let's see how many were picked. Let's do this real quick. So all the way down to here. So 145 champions were picked of the 163, I believe it was.
Okay.
Or is Mel making 164? Or does Mel make it 163? Regardless, it's one of those numbers. So,
So
um,
yeah, we have 95% of the champions have some form of presence this regular season, which is absolutely insane. And then yeah, you've got the whole thing with Mel showing up now, which I'm gonna get more into the patch notes for Midlist Weekly. I feel like that's a little bit of a better avenue for that. But no, I think everybody got to play what they want, got to showcase the champions that they enjoy to play and even bust out some randomness as well and perform on it. So been a really entertaining regular season. Again, shout out to Drop Ward or Tenzin, as some may know him, to getting this formula out here and giving these teams something to look at, especially for the stats enjoyers like myself and Hairwas. So
Yeah, for sure. Um, I was something I was going to point out before we, end this segment. I know it's a little quicker episode. We kind of were just knocking this stuff out real quick for you guys. Uh, I think Victor's actually going to lose a lot of presence because I don't think he's as strong as he was. And the reason why is I think this new season is a little quicker paced with the changes. Games aren't like 22 minutes quick, but I think more leaning towards sub 30, probably between like 26 to 30 minutes is what you're going to see a lot of end times around. My solo queue games have certainly been that. Um, the scrims we were playing have been that. I think that's where Victor will lose some presence because you're not looking to scale as hard. Um, you will want a late game scaling insurance, but I think you're going to be leaning more towards a more burstier mage in the mid lane that is mid game centric. So like the Syndra, for example, that's getting some was kind of getting some more play in week 5, which was on the new patch, kind of leads credence to that, and she was performing well. And with her being a natural counter to Victor as well, um, and him maybe falling off on that power scale, I could see him lose the presence. So he might still win, like he might get picked and win in games, but I mean he suffered like majority of his losses in week 5. So that tells me a lot about the season changes. So I legit do believe Victor will lose some presence. As far as Skarner goes, that champion just doesn't look like he's going away anytime soon. So until they nerf him to the ground, I feel like he's going to be a pick or ban, depending on what side you're on. If you're red side, you got to ban it. If you're blue side, you probably should just pick it. So,
well, I think
um,
teams are making choices now as far as what OPs they want to pick, and they're finding ways to punish the ones being left up. So you're seeing a lot more Skarner bans come out, and then people just leaving the victor up, knowing that their mid laner or their team in general has like fundamental strategies or counters into it. I feel like the teams that made the playoffs know how to play against Victor now. They've seen it enough that they either have a counter pick or have a strategy to go into him.
mm,
But I also think some teams that are playing Victor also aren't putting him in like winning positions in their team comps, like having a big beefy tank for him to kind of hide behind and for the most part scale and do some like long-term damage.
yeah, I
So
definitely don't disagree with what you said, but I still think it's like one of those things where, again, I don't think the season is leaning towards Victor anymore. And
I would agree, yeah.
another thing to note, Varus picking up on some high priority last week, getting like almost half of his games last week of overall split, kind of gives credence to that as well. He's
Hmm.
really really strong mid game, one of the best AD carries in the mid game.
Yep.
So that's kind of my take, and I think the reason why Sivir might be played in that place is because Sivir's spell shield can stop the ulti, right? So the chains of corruption, right? That's what it's called, I believe.
Yes. Sure.
Yeah. So um, that could be why she might get presence. Though I don't think it's a great matchup for Sivir, by the way. But I do think it's like, well, I can block this. I bring utility. It's fine.
Hmm.
Whereas like you're playing Ashe, you're playing Jinx, like you're just a sitting duck for that ulti, right? So I do expect the Varus to maybe get some more play. Maybe a few of these other 80 carries, maybe consider picking him up. Another one I actually do think is going to get more play will actually be Jin as well. I think Jin right now looks really, really strong, and I think, again, he works well in the mid game. Not that he can't play late game well, but we all know Jin is not the greatest at killing tanks. But if tanks kind of start disappearing because you're looking for more of a mid game team with a early game high damage, bruisery type roster, then you don't need to worry about tanks, right? If people are picking tons of Lee Sin, Jin can kill Lee Sin. It's fine. So like I'm just saying like, and I'm not saying Lee Sin's gonna be picked a bunch, but that's a good example of an early mid game champion that I think is doing pretty well right now, for example. So yeah, I think that's what you're gonna be seeing more. And I could be wrong. Maybe everything I just said will go out the window, but that's my prediction of where these champs are gonna go. Um, There will be a few that will just stay. Like I think Casante's not going anywhere because the reality is, if you're picking Casante, it's because he's just a dumb champion and it just provides so much. And the top laners that are good with him, like you said, are going to be good with him regardless. So, uh, yeah, that's kind of my breakdown. There was no crazy stats for me that stood out, but take a peek at the sheet because this was what we ended up with. So we ended up with 98 games total played. That's with the forfeit matches, which I think we had 4 in total,
Mhm.
and then that also includes the 2 tiebreakers that were played. And yeah, blue side heavy prominence. A lot of that had to do with how powerful the power picks were. I do think if the power picks aren't as powerful, then red side could make a move back in playoffs. The problem is Skarner still lingers. But when there's one power pick compared to like 4 or 5 power picks, things can change. And I do think we're going to be leading out of a power pick meta. I do. I don't think it's going to be as heavy for the power pick meta. So, because before it was basically permaban Skarner Victor on red side.
I I think that's a healthy discussion to have for the podcast because to some point I do disagree a little bit, only with Mel showing up
Yeah,
because
I guess she can cause.
it's
I'm gonna tell you guys. I don't care what a win rate says. I played against her and I've played with her and I've played as her. I don't think she's broken. I think people just don't know how to play around her kit, and that is
that
it.
I agree with. Yeah, yeah.
I think her kit is very underwhelming. I think she has strong points, but she lacks range. Tons of range. I know you said it in the rec league chat. Just pick artillery mages. She's not gonna have a fun time. The other thing is she's not blocking bruisers, so good luck if you're playing into a bruiser. There's nothing you can do against that. Your invulnerability lasts 1 second. It's not that long. Yeah, she's not broken. But if you are
Yeah,
playing stuff like Blitzcrank, just be careful.
yeah. Yeah, you found that out the hard way.
hmm
Yep.
I
Yep.
think
But
her W reminds me a lot of um, the control of this exists, right? This is an ability I could use, but I don't have to. So when you're playing certain champions like the Blitzcrank, it's like, dang, I can't do anything just because the ability exists, not because she's going to click it. So it's kind of the old Blitzcrank thing. It's just the fact that Blitzcrank has the hook that makes the lane phase scary.
I just when she's good, she's really good. When she's not good, it's very underwhelming. Like there's not much of a gray area, but I say that with very, very little sample size. I definitely think there are counters out there, and kind of similar to some of the other mages, will take Syndra, Orianna, Victor, Hwei in there. Like not very many people play their counters because their counters have like a very high curve based on play rate.
Yeah, for like no one's playing Valkaz, bro, and Valkaz is good in like
Yeah.
half of those champions you just named.
Vel'Koz, Xerath. I mean, we shout out to Bananasaur. I think week 4 absolutely shit on a Victor player playing Lux mid,
Yeah,
and like, and you when you guys subbed as dyslexic, you had what Xerath mid
yep.
plus another artillery type or
Ziggs.
Xerath Ziggs, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, so like those type of comps, while they are extremely hard to pull off, and you definitely need to practice those a lot, they have their place, and when they're picked correctly, man, it's very hard to play against them.
yeah, very impressive. I could also see something like Nidalee Jungle being really, really good to it as well.
Yeah.
Specifically talking about Victor. I don't know about Mel, but then again, like the W is a high cooldown, so honestly, Nidalee could probably be fine.
Yeah, yeah. The Nidalee's actually like anybody with rapid fire or with low cooldown skill shots. Nidalee comes to mind. Yeah, very good in the mill.
Yeah, so that's like a jungle pick for that, right? But yeah, I mean, we could dive into that all day, but I don't want to talk that a bunch. I mean, we are talking
No,
champs
no.
on champ stats, so it does make sense. But yeah, we won't go any more in depth into that. But yeah, just note that please, I hope you guys are utilizing the sheets and it's been helpful. I know it's been fun for us to break down the stats and use this power pick score that Dropboard was able to supply for us. But yeah, there's been some interesting things and. Sometimes like we don't really go into the big details, but like the big details are just like this is a big number, right? Presence rate is a huge number. Picks, that's a huge number to see. Wins, right? even a power pick score is kind of a big number. With like small numbers, if you want to check out, go look at like ban rates and pick rates. You'll find interesting stats when you look at that stuff. You'll go like, wow, really low ban rate, but a really high pick rate and a really high win rate. Interesting. Like those are the types of stuff I'm talking, and you'll see that when you dive into those deep stats. Um, I'm not gonna really go into that myself right now, but yeah. So yeah, thanks again for watching the shows as always, and um, make sure to check out this weekend's games. It's gonna be a fun weekend. So you got anything else, CLT?
No, no, I appreciate you having me on, including me in all this, and it's a lot of fun this split.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Well, that's gonna be it for Hairwick's Baba Yaga hit list and CLT's Island of Misfits stats. We may or may not end this show with this episode here for the rest of the season. I'm undecided. So if it doesn't come out during playoffs, I apologize, but we will see. Because power rankings after this might be a nude point. Might not be like needed. So yeah, we'll see. So let me know. Maybe if you guys want me to continue it, I will. Or maybe I could add it to the Midwest Weekly segments since they're gonna get shorter. So all right, guys. GG and take care.